Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate
Hello.
and Chris,
Hello.
and we are getting together tonight to talk about Shakespeare Sonnet number 9. Because Shakespeare wrote several of these, so we've got a bunch more to go. Maybe we'll eventually get through all of them. But tonight, Shakespeare Sonnet number 9. Um, so I am going to read that to preview our discussion in a moment. Before we get there, I just want to say if you like these videos, you like what I do, please feel free to support me on subscribestar.com /Zachlog-the-great, and you will find a link in the show description. Um, and having said that, I am going to bring up the poem and we will read it and then we will spend a little while talking about that. So, what we got here? That's it. Okay, let me know when you see that.
I see it.
Okay. Sonnet number 9 by William Shakespeare. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye that thou consum'st thyself in single life? Ah, if thou issueless shalt hap to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife. The world will be thy widow, and still weep that thou no form of thee hast left behind, when every private widow well may keep by children's eyes her husband's shape in mind. Look, what an unthrift in the world doth spend, just but his place, for still the world enjoys it. But beauty's waste hath in the world an end, and kept unused, the user so destroys it. No love toward others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. Okay, so Chris, would you like to get us started tonight?
Sure. So I have a few thoughts, but one is okay, it's presenting a very narcissistic argument for why you should have kids. And I feel like the type of person who would buy into that is not the type of person that would want to devote their time and energy towards raising a kid, because the whole point is, oh yes, I'm so beautiful, what a terrible thing if there's no one that looks like me in the world. And that's not what being a parent should be about, I feel.
I'm too sexy for no airs. Too sexy for no airs.
Well, that's it, boys. The end of the channel.
um, well, okay. So, having was that Right Said Fred? Is that the name of the band? I think that was it. Anyway,
Long
but
said Nate
yeah,
and the
that
rest
too.
of the world.
Having burned that bridge, um, one thing to Chris's point, um, this is also one of a series of sonnets of Shakespeare's on this theme, and so he's basically taking every idea he can to make this argument and throwing it out at different points. And so some of them are maybe better than others, I think would be one way to put it.
Certainly, yeah.
We had another poem like this another time, one of the other sonnets. And I stick to my main comments that, like, this is sort of, I kind of agree with Chris. This is an extremely shallow take on things. But although to go against Chris a little bit, this says nothing about raising a child. This only says you need to produce a few. Just throw them out there. It's all good. You don't have to, be burdened by them. Just have them around.
I suppose, considering the time when this was written, especially, although it still would hold true today, yeah, this is a very male-centric argument.
I will say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not gonna lie. There are a lot of relatively useless women on the internet today that I'm like, yeah, y'all should stop doing what you're doing and have kids. Maybe find some honor in your life.
Well,
Now-
also, purpose and, managing the life of someone who genuinely needs, that kind of attention rather than spewing it out at the world in general.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I do feel like there is a good argument somewhere in here if you don't think necessarily physical beauty, but like if you have a worldview or a system of beliefs that you believe is important, then yeah, like having kids that you can pass that on through, that's definitely important. But yeah, if it's just physical beauty, that's just a little bit too shallow.
The future belongs to. Go ahead.
I really don't think this is talking about, a beautiful mindset or philosophy. When every private widow well may keep by children's eyes her husband's shape in mind. There's the deal right there. I'm not talking about the shape of her husband's mind. I'm talking about her husband's shape.
I will say it is kind of interesting, like the turn here. No love toward others in that bosom sits, that on himself such murderous shame commits. And like, he's saying, by refusing to have children, by refusing to pass on your genes, you are, although they didn't have that term, but by refusing to do that, you are being selfish, and you're mistreating. I don't know quite what the word is, but you're not doing a favor for the rest of the world, and it's kind of funny because these days, some people are making exactly the opposite argument, that having children is selfish, and like there's too many of us and we're destroying the planet, and if you have kids, that's a selfish and destructive act, and it's like
You know what? I agree with those people. There are too many of them, and they are destroying the world.
Now I will say, on the other hand of that, I think part of the reason some of those people are so destructive is because they don't have kids and have a purpose and have a family that is actually giving them a reason to make a stable life. Maybe it's a possibility.
Well, and I think that's just also a culture thing. If you are not raised with the idea that having a family is important, that's not something that you're just going to pick up out of nowhere.
It is kind of interesting though, because I remember I can actually remember, like, when I was 17 or 18, like having a conversation with a friend of mine, and like in saying that I wanted to be a dad someday. And I don't remember anyone ever like telling me that. It's just I remember at least that far back, like that was something that mattered to me, and it was like it's kind of odd, like looking back at that now, because I wouldn't have said so then, but from my perspective now, I'm pretty much a kid then. Like, and why am I thinking about that?
Because you're getting to the point in your life where you're going to try and find the person with whom to start a family, and so it's an important thought to have. I was thinking I wanted to have a wife and a family from the time I was like 13. It's kind of like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to go do a bunch of dating. I don't want to, run around and party. I want to find a good, wise, beautiful woman. Well, a woman as I would conceive of her at 13. So, like, I don't know. In a few years when I'm 16, find a good 16-year-old woman. Well,
Yeah,
it took a little longer than that, but that's it. That's what I wanted from the time I started thinking about being in relationships.
yeah, pretty much as far back as I could remember, I wanted to have a family. I don't remember what happened it, but also, I mean, like, I grew up like, there was a bunch of family issues, but my dad was an awesome dad. So, like, that was a pretty good role model.
So let's see. Sorry, I'm looking at. I'm trying to pull us back to the poem again. Um,
Say the line.
to get back to the poem,
Ah,
it is what is it? It's you say it's a thing of physical. He's talking about physical attractiveness. At the same time, if you look at the first couple of stanzas at least, um, if thou issueless shalt have to die, the world will wail thee like a makeless wife, and the world will mourn you like a widow, and hopefully, if most widows who are mourning their husbands aren't just like, oh, he was pretty. Um,
But then
they,
go to
they,
the next line, that no form of thee hast left behind. It's like, okay, it seems to cut right against what you're saying. Is yes, the world will be sad because all those pretty all that pretty bloodline just went out the window. All of your beautiful ancestors took it upon themselves to get laid and procreate, and your goofy tail had to let down the team after all these centuries. And now we've got to settle for uglier people.
if we keep going on this, I might have to actually bring up that song and see if I can.
Never.
Admittedly, I would have to fiddle around with the audio to get that to sound any good, but I could probably do that on the fly. Anyway, but well, that thou no form of thee hast left behind, whatever private widow well may keep by children's eyes her husband's shape in mind. But like, your kids aren't your children don't just look like you. You end up being quite surprised at some points some of the ways they act like you too. Um, I have to admit, I find it kind of frustrating that they seem to pick up on my bad characteristics a lot better than some of the things I like about myself. Um, but there are character things that carry on in your kids as well. It's actually kind of funny. I remember, one of the things that I noticed that was just there's a certain position I tend to sleep in. I just kind of, or I'll end up that way, like by morning. And we noticed that like my older son would end up doing the same thing. And I looked at that, I'm like, you're asleep. You're not watching someone else and trying to do what they're doing. Like, you're asleep, you're just doing what comes naturally to you. Like, is that in my genes somewhere that you end up doing that thing? It's like the ways that your kids carry on you can be quite surprising.
Yeah, there's a trait that runs in my family. So all the men in my family, whenever we get really nervous, like really upset about something, even though it's completely inappropriate, we just get a big smile and just start laughing hysterically. And this is very bad because we could be, discussing something serious with our significant other, and all of a sudden we start laughing and they do not appreciate it. And this is like a consistent trait. And yeah, like it's just what we do. It's strange
materials for any women coming into the family.
Yes. No, like
Here you
literally, I was riding with a girlfriend who accidentally rear-ended an undercover cop. And while we were there waiting for another police officer to come, I could not stop laughing, and she was very upset with me.
Isn't that the character from the movie Joker? Am I imagining, like, I haven't seen it, but isn't that like part of his problems, that like he has this tendency to laugh at completely inappropriate times?
Yeah, although it has come in handy. I've never actually been in a real fight, because whenever it's come close, I've just started laughing and the other guy would back down. Somebody half your side that's excited to get in a fight with you, that gives people pause.
Now we know why this is a survival trait. Yeah.
T-Rex was like, oh man, no.
People might get in a fight with someone bigger than them, but nobody wants to get in a fight with someone crazier than them.
True.
But yeah, so I don't know, like as far as a poem, this is great. And I think that the sort of character, because I don't feel like Shakespeare is, going around finding all the beautiful little boys and be like, no, you need to procreate now. But as far as the narrator of the poem, like, I think it's great. It works really well. I feel like a lot of the issues that we're having with it are very much intentional. And like you said, this is a part of a series. I know I've read some of them. I haven't read all of them, so I'm not sure what arguments he makes. But yeah, for like, hey, how many different ways can I think of to convince somebody to get married and have kids? I mean, you're going to get to this argument at some point. It's not a good argument, but if you're going to make it, I mean, he's a master wordsmith.
I mean, I gotta admit that point does stand. If you see it as like somebody starting with their better stuff earlier on, now they're kind of moving down toward the bottom of the barrel, then yeah, okay, I can accept this as a useful thing at that point.
I mean, he's already wrote 9 of these. He's kind of
and it's like, yeah, reasons to have kids: pass on honor, teach the world dignity, posterity, the pride of your nation. Women are soft. You're handsome. I don't know. I'm done. Sonnet 10. Dirty, dirty sex.
But Sonnet 32. I think you get a tax break or something.
There you go.
Now I will say, relating this to others of his, like in number 3, it's kind of similar in some ways, the overall argument, but he says, thou art thy mother's glass, and she in thee calls back the lovely April of her prime. And, just the idea that, like, when you're old and you're worn out and your face is, all wrinkly and stuff, like, you're going to be able to look and see, oh yeah, that's what I was like 20 years ago. That's what I was like 30 years ago. And that's like, they didn't have cameras. So, it's
well, it is kind of going back to something that Nate said earlier, like the sort of like generational thing. It's a matter of thinking of yourself not as an individual, but like as a bloodline, as like one in a series of generations. And if you think that way, then it's you can't think, oh, it's all about me. You can't think, oh, yes, everything that has come before has found its fulfillment in me. There's no need to go further. But that is a much wider perspective that's at odds with, oh, yeah, I am great.
Well, and it's also, now that I think about it, an interesting question for this one is like, they talk about, if you're, teaching, if you're in a writing class or teaching writing, they talk about, thinking about your audience, like who is it you're writing to, and, try and fit it to that. And then if he was writing these for a particular person to persuade a particular young man, well, what is going to be persuasive to that specific person? And that's another, kind of way to look at this. And, is he, kind of, a little bit vain, a little bit proud of his looks? Well,
Trying to TikToker.
they didn't exist yet, but someone who might be someday.
So
What? TikTok wasn't around when the Bard was writing? I am aghast.
I'm trying to think of like the TikTok version of Hamlet or Othello.
So what you were saying though, it gives me the idea of some like older person being like, yeah, my son's a selfish jerk. I want grandkids. Can you convince him to settle down? Like, I'll give you money. Just write something good. Yeah, no, he's just completely narcissistic. He doesn't care about anything. That's all you have to go on.
Well, Shakespeare was attempting to make a living doing this. This wasn't art for art's sake. A lot of this was art so I can freaking eat. So, that's not that far-fetched. I don't know if any scholars have investigated that theory yet, but it doesn't seem that out of the question to me.
I can't remember who wrote it, but it does remind me of a poem. I think it's called like the Helmet Seller or something like that, where the poet, who is male, was writing a female narrator telling a young woman, oh yeah, you should just sleep with all the guys. And it's like, okay, there's a pretty obvious reason why the poet wrote this.
Here, wait. Hey, sorry, minor technical problem. I accidentally stopped the recording and restarted it, so it's going again. I meant to hit a different button because they rearrange things. So I'll have to splice these together later. Not a huge problem, but sorry about that brief interruption. It's you had the title right. The Pretty Helmet Seller Old by Francois Villon. Chris, does that sound right?
Let's see. I'm looking at it now. I think so. Yes.
That actually.
Yeah, it's an old lady talking about how she wishes she would have slept with a lot more men when she was young. So yes, a more straightforward motivation for the author.
Feminism, male feminists. No, not going there right now. But let me see. Where were we?
Well, I do want to say, whenever I first read it, the first thing that I thought of But it's like, okay, two guys who have kids invite me to read a poem with them about, hey, man, you should totally have kids.
Well, see, the other
our plot, buddy.
I won't disagree with that either. But the other part of that is our usual third isn't even married. So our usual third these days isn't even married. So I would feel worse about having him on because it would be like you're married at least. You're a good bit closer.
Yeah, the unmarried guy comes on like, I just came here to discuss poetry and have a good time, and honestly, I'm feeling so attacked right now.
Well, unfortunately, we've had a couple of those.
Perhaps you're a great guy. I don't mean that in a character way. I'm talking about things that you literally lack and that you don't have. Work on that. Good people need to breed.
Gordon Unthrift in the world does. It is kind of interesting, like the third stanza. What an unthrift in the world does spend shifts by his place, for still the world enjoys it. Like, you have some, trust fund, some rich trust fund, maybe, throwing money everywhere, buying ridiculous things. And like, okay, it's wasteful and stupid, but at the same time, like, people are also making a living, building the cars and the houses that he lives in. And so it's like, even if he's wasteful and selfish, like it is, creating something for other people out at the edges. Whereas, like he says, if you die without having kids, there's the if you consider good genes a kind of wealth, well, those just disappear. They're gone at that point. And I do think that's a valid point. Like, if you're glad you're alive, I think it's fair to say that, maybe you have some obligation to pass that on at some point.
I see my kids and they're so bright and happy, and they got the couple of decent traits I've got, and then their mom supplied a whole lot of good traits, and so they're extremely handsome little boys, and I'm just like, good job, mostly her. I feel like I've improved my own bloodline. Whatever happened to my poor wife's? She ain't in the room, is she? Okay, good. She always gets mad at me for saying stuff like that. She thinks I'm handsome. Thank God for a woman with bad taste in men.
Or bad eyesight. That's the other.
No, she sees well enough.
Yeah, I was telling someone the other day that whenever my wife and I first started going out, she was working 2 jobs, so she was just tired constantly, and it was like, that was my chance.
There you go.
I was it is one thing that is kind of interesting, and I was thinking about like doing an independent video on this, but I can't really frame the whole thing quite right just yet. But like, okay, to be as blunt about as possible, as guys, like, if you put moral questions aside, like, we pretty much just want to have sex, period. Like, if she's attractive, that's great. But like, we mostly just want to have sex. We're not that selective. Like I said, moral questions aside, I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm saying, like, in terms of just, pretty much, basic drives. So women are, kind of the picky ones. And, there's very good reasons for that. And so there's this interesting thing that, like, and also, well, I mean, and part of the reason women are selective is that, for every kid, a woman has to put a lot more, a much more personal investment into, getting that kid together and out there in the world than a man does. And so, like, kind of because of that, like, if a woman, like, says, basically picks a guy, even just for, like, one time, like, she is like, basically, even if she's not aware of it, and at the great majority of the time, I would say people aren't, she is telling that guy in a way no one else can, I'm glad you exist. And I think the world should have more people like you. And it's kind of like there's no I don't know what a guy does on the other end that sounds anything like that for a woman. Um, because I'm not a woman. Um, oh wait, I'll just say no. Hey, I'm a woman now, and give me a minute to think about this. I'm sure I can come up with. That's how it works today, right? But
Again, but the interesting point is that, even if we leave moral questions aside, being in a committed relationship, marriage, essentially, is still better than being out there catting around, because it's the difference between being a nomadic hunter gatherer and being a farmer if you apply that whole thing to sex. If you're in this committed relationship, you're all together, you basically just harvest the sex. There it is. It's right there. You ain't got to go and find it and drag it down. You just got to go out in the field and gather up a nice big bundle of sex. And it's great. It's not like I have to lay out, be like, is there sex approaching? What tactics must I use to acquire this sex? Will I be slain in the struggle? I don't know. It's more just like, so, gotta go out in the silo, grab me a big old bin full of it. It's gonna be great.
I mean, you do still have to extend the metaphor. You do still have to maintain the land, so to speak, and you know, but yes, it
Don't
is
see many
a
fat.
rather
You see a lot of portly farmers.
it is a rather more secure way of acquiring said resource. Um, um,
But yeah, so I think the sort of a male equivalent from what you were saying earlier, Sean, is for the man not to have sex with other women, even whenever it's possible, even when there's the opportunity. I think the exclusiveness is the draw there.
I kind of see that, and I don't disagree. It's just like, give me a second. There's no one, like, there's no one action that puts that out in quite that puts that message across in quite the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because the way Sean put it is that it's, that's a positive affirmation. That is directly saying, yes, you. For a man, it's basically like, it's essentially how long does it take till failure? And if failure never happens, fine, but by that time you're dead. And so who can really appreciate it? It is
Well,
and that's probably why women are crazy.
I mean, that's basically marriage, though.
Fair. It's going, hey, I'm trying to prove the negative here. I'm trying to prove that I don't want this.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of marriage, is a man standing up before the community and being like, yes, I am taking responsibility for my relationship with this woman at the exclusion of other women. Any children that we have, they'll have my last name. I'll take care of them. This whole thing is my responsibility now. Hold me accountable. God, you hold me accountable to this too.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone all over the place now. And I don't think we're going to find our way back significantly. I don't think I have a ton else to say about this poem. Nate, how about you?
No, not really. I mean, I agree in principle. I find it a little, to quote a American masterpiece, shallow and pedantic. Just kind of on a surface reading, but if you think about it, you can find your own depths in it. You know, got to peel that onion a little.
Ogres are like onions. They stink. What? No. Chris.
Well, in the little bit of research I did, it mentioned that a lot of the words used had connotations of masturbation. So in that case, it comes, it's sort of the argument's like, hey, if you're spending your seed anyway, you might as well, put it where it'll do some good.
I mean, fair enough, Shakes. Oh wow, that gives the whole word Shakespeare a whole new meaning too.
I actually remember. I think this story was from before I was in high school, but there was a story at my school that, like, X number of years ago, like, some boy was, like, caught handling things himself in English class, and someone joked that gives the term Shakespeare a whole new meaning. So I can't end it on that. We've got to do something else. Someone save me.
No.
Yes, if the alternative is between taking matters into your own hands and finding a wife and making some kids, go out and find a wife. To quote comedian Owen Benjamin, be fruitful and multiply, don't be fruity and blow a guy.
I miss Owen Benjamin.
He's still around.
He used to be on Louder with Crowder a lot, and he kind of hasn't been.
If you want to see him, he's on Odyssey on some of his stuff. ODYSEE. So, yeah, he's still kicking. If I understand correctly, he's basically now a farmer / comedian, which is an interesting combination.
I don't know, man. Some of my best and funniest stories come from the farm, so that sort of connection to the earth and just the stuff that happens while you're out there is it's ripe for amusement.
It's I forget who this. It might have been Randall Monroe, XKCD, but I think he said there's an interesting correlation between how successful a comedian is and how many of his jokes are about hotels and airports. Anyway, okay. I think we've said about all we're going to say about Shakespeare Sonnet number 9 tonight. So I am going to close us out. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nate, for joining us tonight.
Why, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Have a good one.